The server stood quietly beside the table while the card reader blinked red again. My mother-in-law laughed it off at first, but her hands tightened around her purse like she already knew something the rest of us didn't. In that small, crowded restaurant, the air suddenly felt too thin to breathe. We had only planned a simple lunch, nothing special, nothing heavy, just two women escaping the afternoon heat in a familiar neighborhood diner. I had known my mother-in-law for years, long enough to recognize the difference between her polite smile and the kind that hid worry. Outside, traffic passed as usual, sunlight cutting across the windows, but inside that booth, something quiet and unsettling had begun to unfold. The bell above the diner door rang the way it always did, thin, tired, familiar. It sounded like it had rung for decades and never learned a new note. The place smelled like hot oil and old coffee. Noon light slid through the front windows and stopped halfway across the floor, as if it didn't want to go any farther. We chose the same booth we always did, vinyl cracked at the seams, table wobbling just enough to notice. Ordinary, safe, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. That's why we were there. The menu stuck slightly when I opened it, pages soft from too many hands. Across from me, my mother-in-law smiled and sighed, like sitting down had taken more effort than she wanted to admit. She folded her purse into her lap, careful with it, like it might slip away if she wasn't watching. The waitress didn't ask what we wanted. She never did. Usual, she said, pen already moving. My mother-in-law nodded. Yes, ma'am. Her voice was light, almost cheerful. We talked about small things while we waited. The heat outside, a neighbor's new fence, a cousin she meant to call but hadn't yet. She spoke in gentle circles, never staying long on one thought. Between sentences, she checked her phone. Screen on, screen off, face down on the table. Then, after a moment, back into her hand again. I pretended not to notice, but I noticed. The diner hummed softly around us, plates clinking, someone laughing too loud near the counter, the low scrape of a chair being dragged back into place. Life moving on without asking permission. I watched her fingers tap the edge of the table, then stop when she realized she was doing it. When the food came, the steam rose slow and honest. Eggs, toast, fries too pale to be perfect. The waitress slid the plates down like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Maybe she had. My mother-in-law thanked her, then just sat there. She didn't pick up her fork right away. The food cooled between us. I took a bite to fill the space, listening to the soft crunch, louder than it should have been. Across from me, she cut her eggs carefully, like she was saving them for later. Her eyes drifted to the window, then back to her phone. She didn't look hungry anymore. You okay? I asked. She smiled. Not with her eyes. Oh, I'm fine, she said. Just not as hungry as I thought. She folded her napkin once. Then again. Precise. Controlled. The kind of movement people make when they're trying to keep something in. I watched her phone light up once more before she turned it face down. Slower this time. Like it carried weight. Like it could speak. If it wanted to. The diner felt smaller then. Lower ceiling. Closer walls. Nothing had happened. Not really. But the way she sat there, careful, quiet, rehearsed, made me feel like we were waiting for a line neither of us wanted to say out loud. Yet, I took another bite, chewed slowly, and wondered why a simple lunch suddenly felt like the beginning of something neither of us had ordered. The bill arrived folded once, set gently between the salt and the sugar. No rush. No weight to it yet. Sunlight had shifted while we were eating, sliding lower on the wall, turning the dust in the air visible. The diner felt quieter all of a sudden, like it was holding its breath. My coffee had gone cold, untouched for longer than I meant it to. I watched the edge of the paper curl slightly where the steam had brushed it. She reached for her purse without looking at me. It was a practiced movement. Smooth, familiar. The kind of motion you don't think about because you've done it your whole life. She pulled out her card and handed it over with a small smile. Not nervous, not hurried, just ready. The waitress took it, still smiling, already tapping the screen of the machine like she knew the steps by heart. The machine beeped once, then paused. We waited. The sound it made next was dull and short. Not loud enough to be rude, but not quiet enough to ignore. The waitress frowned just slightly, then turned the screen toward herself. Whatever it said, it wasn't meant for us. Oh, she said lightly. Let me try that again. She did. Another beep, another pause. My mother-in-law laughed then. A soft sound, almost polite. The kind of laugh people use when they don't want a moment to grow teeth. Well, that's strange, she said. She said it like she was talking about the weather, like nothing had changed. But she didn't look at the machine. She didn't look at me either. Her eyes stayed on the table, on the small dark knot in the wood near the edge. The waitress apologized even though it wasn't her fault. She tried a third time. Fingers quick, practiced. The screen flashed again. Red this time, I think. Or maybe it just felt red. It happens sometimes, the waitress said, smiling the way people do when they've learned how to make other people comfortable. My mother-in-law nodded. Too quickly. Of course, she said. Technology. Her laugh came again, thinner now, like it had been stretched too far. I noticed her hand hadn't moved back to her purse. It stayed flat on the table, palm down, as if she were keeping something in place. Her fingers were still, too still. The diner noise returned in pieces, a spoon clinking, a chair scraping, someone at the counter asking for more cream. Life continuing without noticing us. The waitress said she could try again later, or run it at the front, or wait. Whatever's easiest, my mother-in-law said. Her voice was calm, steady, almost relieved. That's when it struck me, not like a shock, but like a quiet thought settling in. She wasn't surprised. Not really. There was no sharp intake of breath, no searching through her purse for another card, no questions. Just acceptance. She folded her hands together and waited. I looked at her then. Really looked. At the set of her shoulders. The careful way she kept her smile in place. The way her eyes stayed down, as if looking up might crack something open. The waitress stepped away to give us a moment. The machine sat there between us. Dark now. Silent. Finished. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words didn't come. And in that quiet, with the bill still untouched, I wondered not for the first time how long she'd been carrying this moment with her, and whether this was only the beginning. The machine sat between us like it had finished saying all it needed to say. Dark screen. No apology. I reached for my purse before I thought it through. The movement felt automatic, almost protective, like stepping forward when someone stumbles. I told myself this was nothing. A delay. A small inconvenience. Something ordinary people fix every day without remembering it later. I've got it, I said. My voice sounded louder than I meant it to. She looked up then, just for a second. Her eyes met mine and moved away again, quick as a blink. She nodded once, the way people do when they're grateful but don't want to argue. The waitress returned, relief already in her posture. I handed over my card. Plastic. Warm from my palm. Familiar. Reliable. At least, it had always been. She slid it into the machine. Beep. The sound felt sharper this time. Closer. Like it belonged to me now. The screen glowed, paused, then froze in that same quiet refusal. We waited. I held my breath without realizing it. The waitress tried again, smile still there but thinner now. Her fingers slowed, careful, like she was hoping patience might change. The outcome. Beep, pause. Then the same dull sound. The same ending. Oh, she said softly. That's unusual. I looked at the machine like it might explain itself if I stared long enough. I hadn't checked my phone. I hadn't felt anything shift in my body. No warning. No sense of trouble approaching. I just used it this morning, I said. I don't know who I was trying to convince. My mother-in-law didn't speak. She sat very still, hands folded, eyes on the edge of the table. Her mouth pressed into a line. That wasn't quite a frown. Not fear. Something quieter. Something older. The waitress apologized again. She said she could bring the manager. Or we could try at the front. Or wait a minute. Of course, I said. Take your time. Time suddenly felt like the one thing we had too much of around us. The diner kept breathing. Someone laughed near the counter. A fork clattered to the floor and was picked up again. Life moved easily past our booth, unaware of the small crack forming beneath our feet. I finally checked my phone. No missed calls. No alerts. No warnings waiting politely at the top of the screen. I turned it face down anyway. The waitress stepped away again, giving us space. The silence settled in, heavier now. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter, the soft squeak of the ceiling fan overhead. I glanced at my mother-in-law. She didn't look at me. Her shoulders were tight, like she was bracing against a wind only she could feel. I saw it then, not panic, not embarrassment, preparation, as if she had already walked this road in her mind and knew where it led. That's when it reached me, slow, unwelcome. This wasn't a coincidence. Not anymore. 2 cards. 2 quiet refusals. The machine sat there, innocent and unmoved, while something unseen rearranged our afternoon. I felt a small chill crawl up my arms. Despite the warmth of the diner, I wanted to laugh it off. To make it small, but I couldn't ignore the way her hands stayed folded, or the way she kept her eyes down, or the growing sense that whatever was happening hadn't started with us sitting down to eat. The waitress returned with the manager, and I knew, before anyone spoke, that this lunch was already becoming something we wouldn't forget. The manager came over with a smile that had been practiced in mirrors. Kind, careful, the kind meant to smooth things without touching them. He stood just far enough away to feel respectful, close enough to hear us lower our voices. The waitress hovered near the counter, pretending to wipe something that was already clean. The machine sat on the table, quiet now, like it had nothing left to add. "I'm sure it's just a connection issue," the manager said. His voice was gentle, reassuring. He'd said it before. My mother-in-law nodded quickly. Too quickly again. "Of course," she said. "These things happen." She smiled, not with her eyes. I felt my face warm. That slow heat that climbs your neck when you realize other people might be watching. I glanced around the diner. A couple near the window pretended to study their menus. Someone at the counter stared a second too long, then looked away. Nothing dramatic. Just noticed. "I can step outside and call the bank," I said. The words felt like a solution, like action, like control. "That might help," the manager said. "Take your time." My mother-in-law gathered her purse, hands careful, movements measured. She stood slowly, as if standing too fast might spill something she was trying to keep inside. I followed her out of the booth, the vinyl sighing as it released us. As we walked toward the door, I heard the bell ring again for someone else. A new table, a new lunch. The world resetting itself behind us. Outside, the sun was brighter than I expected. Too bright. The parking lot shimmered faintly, heat rising in thin waves. Cars passed on the road, windows down, radios loud enough to be heard for half a second and then gone. She stopped near the window, just out of sight from inside. "I'm so sorry," she said. It came out small. "There's nothing to be sorry about," I said quickly. Too quickly now. She nodded, eyes on the pavement. She pulled out her phone, then paused. Her thumb hovered over the screen like she was waiting for permission. "I'll call," she said. "You don't have to." Her voice was steady, but her hand wasn't. She stepped a few feet away, turning her back to me. Not far, just enough. I watched the muscles in her shoulders tighten as the phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. She listened. Her head dipped slightly, like she was bracing. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I could tell by the stillness that it wasn't saying what she hoped. She nodded again, said once, said "I see" very softly. When she hung up, she didn't turn around right away. A truck roared past, loud enough to fill the space between us. When the sound faded, the silence felt heavier than before. She faced me then. "All my cards are blocked," she said. "No drama, no tears. Just the words placed carefully between us like something fragile." I felt the ground shift under my feet. Not sharply, but enough to notice. Like realizing you've been standing on something that moves. "Blocked?" I asked. She nodded. "All of them." Behind the glass, I could see the waitress clearing our table, our plates already stacked. The booth empty again, as if we'd never been there at all. I looked at my phone, and for the first time, I wondered what it would say back to me. My phone felt heavier than it should have, warm from my hand, quiet in a way that made me uneasy. We stood just outside the diner window, the glass smudged with fingerprints and old sunlight. Inside, someone laughed near the counter. The sound slipped out through the door each time it opened, then vanished again. Life was still happening in there, just not with us. I dialed my bank. The call connected faster than I expected. A calm voice greeted me, steady and practiced. I gave my name, verified my birthday, answered questions I'd answered 100 times before. My mother-in-law stood beside me, eyes on the road, purse held close to her side. "Please hold," the voice said. The music that followed was thin and looping. I watched a leaf skitter across the parking lot, pushed by a breeze I hadn't noticed before. Somewhere behind us, the bell rang again. The voice came back. "There appears to be a temporary hold on your account," she said. Temporary, a word meant to soften things. "Why?" I asked. "Pending review," she said. "It shouldn't take long." I thanked her because that's what people do. I ended the call and stared at my screen, waiting for something else to appear. A message, a correction, anything. Nothing did. I looked up at my mother-in-law. She was watching me now closely, like she'd been waiting for this part. "They blocked mine too," I said. She closed her eyes for a moment. Just a moment, then opened them again. "I was afraid of that," she said, not surprised. Afraid. The word settled between us, heavy and honest. She leaned against the window, the glass cool through her sleeve. I noticed how tired she suddenly looked. Not just today tired, something deeper. Like she'd been carrying a weight she'd learned how to hide from everyone, even herself. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. Her voice was low, almost lost to the passing cars. "I know," I said. "And I meant it." She told me then, not everything, but enough. About accounts she'd helped manage, about papers she hadn't fully understood, about trusting voices that sounded familiar on the phone, family names, friendly tones, promises made too quickly, small decisions, one after another. "I thought I was helping," she said. I believed her. Inside the diner, our booth sat empty now, the table wiped clean. No sign we'd ever been there. The manager glanced toward the door once, then turned away, already moving on. I felt embarrassed, yes, but underneath that was something else. A quiet realization. This wasn't about lunch, or cards, or a machine that wouldn't cooperate. This was about how easily ordinary days can tip into something else. How quickly certainty can thin. A breeze lifted her hair, then let it fall back into place. She straightened her purse strap and took a breath that sounded practiced. "We'll figure it out," she said. Not hopeful, determined. I nodded, though. I wasn't sure how as we walked toward the car. I glanced back once more at the diner. The bell rang for someone new. Another ordinary lunch beginning. And I understood then whatever had been blocked wasn't just our cards. Something else had been interrupted. And it wasn't done with us yet. The car doors closed with a sound that felt too final for the middle of the day. Not a slam, just a firm click, like punctuation. We sat there for a moment with the engine off. The air inside was warm and unmoving, holding the smell of old upholstery and the faint trace of her perfume. Outside, a shopping cart rattled across the lot, guided by someone who looked like they knew exactly where they were going. She rested, her hands on her lap, still folded, still careful. "I should have told you sooner," she said. Her eyes stayed on the windshield, where a thin crack ran from the corner like a hairline fracture in glass. I'd never noticed it before. Or maybe I had and forgot. "Some things only show up when you stop moving." "Told me what?" I asked. She inhaled slowly, like she was measuring how much air she'd need. "I didn't understand everything," she said. "The paperwork, the calls, they talked fast. Used names I recognized." Her voice didn't shake. That was what surprised me. It was steady in the way people sound when they've already had this conversation with themselves 100 times. She told me about helping a family member move money around. Just temporarily. About signing where she was told to sign. About trusting because trust had always worked before. I didn't want to bother anyone, she said. Everyone's busy. The car creaked softly as she shifted. It sounded like the seat remembered other conversations like this. Quiet ones. Confessions spoken only because there was nowhere else for them to go. I listened. That was all I could do. She spoke about the letters that came in the mail. How she stacked them neatly on the counter, meaning to open them later. How later kept slipping away. How some nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations she couldn't quite remember word for word. I kept thinking, it would sort itself out, she said, her mouth curved into something like a smile. But it didn't hold. Outside, a car backed out slowly, its reverse lights blinking like a warning no one pays attention to until it's too late. I thought about all the times she'd laughed things off, the way she smoothed moments over, the way she carried worry quietly, like a purse she never set down. I'm not angry, I said. She nodded, but her shoulders didn't relax. I'm embarrassed, she said. That's worse. She finally turned and looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes were wet but steady, like she refused to let the feeling spill over. I didn't mean to pull you into this. I reached over and rested my hand on hers. The skin was cool, dry, real. We're already in it, I said. The words surprised me as much as they seemed to comfort her. She exhaled, long and slow, like letting go of something she'd been holding for a very long time. We started the car. The engine hummed to life, ordinary and reliable. As we pulled out of the lot, the diner disappeared behind us, swallowed by traffic and afternoon light. The road ahead looked the same as it always had, but the silence between us had changed. And I knew, as we drove, that this was only the first time she'd said these things out loud, not the last. The radio stayed off. She didn't ask, and I didn't reach for it. The silence felt intentional, like something we'd both agreed to without saying so. The road stretched ahead of us, pale and familiar, the kind you could drive without thinking if you wanted to. I didn't want to. The tires hummed softly against the asphalt. A steady sound, comforting, if you let it be. She sat with her purse in her lap, both hands resting on it as if it might slide away if she didn't hold it there. Her shoulders were squared, posture careful, like she was trying to look composed for someone who wasn't in the car with us. Houses passed by in slow rhythm, lawns freshly cut, curtains half drawn, life continuing in neat rectangles. I watched her in the side mirror reflection instead of turning my head. The way her jaw tightened, then loosened. The way her eyes stayed forward, never drifting to the window like they usually did. The afternoon light softened as we drove. It stretched shadows across the road, long and thin, like fingers reaching for something just out of frame. The sky looked the same as it always had. Blue, unbothered. I never meant for it to get this far, she said. Her voice filled the car. Gentle but heavy. It settled in the space between us, resting there. I know, I said. She nodded once, as if that answer matched something she already believed. We stopped at a red light. The car idled beneath us. A man crossed the street carrying a bag of groceries, one handle stretched too far, cans clinking softly with each step. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look worried. The light changed. We kept going. She adjusted the purse strap again, a small movement repeated more than necessary. I wondered how long she'd been doing that. How many days? How many weeks? I should have asked for help, she said. The words sounded like they'd been waiting. Yes, I said. Not sharp, not accusing, just honest. She let out a breath. That sounded like relief mixed with regret. A sound that didn't ask for forgiveness, only acknowledgement. The car crested a small hill, and for a moment, the road ahead disappeared. Just sky, just light. Then the pavement came back into view, steady and unavoidable. I thought about the papers she mentioned, the unopened letters, the way time can slip quietly past you while you're busy believing everything will be fine. We turned onto her street. The houses grew closer together, familiar, comforting in their predictability. Her porch came into view, paint peeling slightly near the steps, wind chimes hanging crooked by the door. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt loud. She didn't move right away. Neither did I don't know what comes next, she said. Her voice was small now. Not afraid, just tired. We'll take it one step at a time, I said. She nodded, staring at the front door like it might already know we were coming. When she finally opened the car door, the hinges creaked softly. The sound echoed longer than it should have. As we walked toward the house, I had the strange sense that crossing that threshold would change something. That once we went inside, there would be no pretending this was just a bad lunch. The door waited, and so did everything we hadn't seen yet. The house smelled the same as it always did. Clean, familiar, a little like dust warmed by afternoon light. She set her purse down on the kitchen counter with care, placing it beside the mail stack she hadn't touched yet. Envelopes leaned against one another, some unopened, some already slit and folded back into themselves like they'd tried to disappear. We stood there for a moment, listening to the refrigerator hum. The clock above the sink ticked softly, marking time without asking what it was costing us. I'll make some tea, she said. She filled the kettle, her movement steady, almost ritual. The faucet squeaked the way it always had. The kettle clicked into place on the stove. Ordinary sounds. Anchors. When she sat at the table, she brought the mail with her, set it down in a neat stack, straightened the edges. I noticed how her hands hesitated before touching the first envelope. Like paper could bruise, she slid one toward me. Can you read that one? She asked. Her voice was calm, but she didn't look up. The paper felt thin between my fingers. Official, heavy with meaning. Words crowded the page, balances, notices, dates already passed. I read slowly, careful with my tone, like volume might change the message. She nodded as I spoke. Not surprised, just listening. One letter led to another. Statements folded and refolded. Numbers circled in pen, then crossed out. A language neither of us had wanted to learn but now had to translate together. They sent that one twice, she said, pointing. I didn't know what it meant. She said of another. Her voice stayed even, but I could hear the effort beneath it, like she was holding herself upright by will alone. The kettle whistled, sharp and sudden. She stood too quickly, knocking her chair back. It scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet kitchen. She winced, then smiled faintly, as if apologizing to the room. She poured the water slowly, steam rising between us. For a moment, the papers blurred behind it, softened. We sat again. As we kept reading, patterns emerged. Effie's stacking quietly. Missed deadlines that didn't announce themselves. Promises written in polite language that hid sharp edges underneath. This one sounded so kind on the phone, she said. I didn't think. She stopped there. I reached across the table and touched the corner of one envelope. Didn't move it, just felt it. Real, unavoidable. It doesn't mean you were careless, I said. She shook her head slightly. It means I was tired. The clock kept ticking, outside. A breeze moved through the trees, rustling leaves against the window. The sound drifted in and out, unconcerned with our discovery. By the time the stack thinned, the light had shifted. Late afternoon now. Shadows stretched across the table, breaking the papers into sections of dark and bright. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. I didn't think it would look like this, she said. Neither had I. We sat there quietly, tea cooling untouched, surrounded by proof of something that had been growing without noise. And I understood then this wasn't chaos. It was accumulation, and we were only just beginning to see how far it had gone. The light in the kitchen softened without asking permission. Late afternoon slipping toward evening, the kind of light that tells you the day is moving on, whether you're ready or not. She sat with her hands folded in front of her, eyes on the table. The papers were still spread out, but we weren't reading anymore. We already knew what they said. Knowing didn't make it easier. It just made it quieter. I kept thinking I could fix it myself, she said. Her voice was low, not defensive, just tired. I watched the way her thumb rubbed the edge of her other hand, back and forth, like she was smoothing something invisible. The kitchen chair creaked slightly when she shifted her weight. The house answered her movement, the way old houses do. I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle things, she said. That was when I finally understood. Not just the papers, not the accounts, but the silence she'd been carrying. The way she'd smiled through questions. The way she'd laughed things away before they had a chance to ask more of her. She had mistaken independence for isolation. And no one had stopped her. I didn't know how to say I was overwhelmed. She continued, so I didn't say anything at all. Outside, a car passed slowly, tires whispering over pavement. Somewhere down the block, a door closed. The world kept offering small, ordinary sounds, like reminders that this moment didn't have to be loud to be real. She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were steady, clear. No tears asking to be saved. I'm scared, she said, just that. No apology. No explanation. I nodded. It felt like the only honest thing to do. So am I said. She exhaled then, long, shaky at the end, the kind of breath that comes after holding one too long. I didn't mean to put this on you, she said. You didn't, I answered. It was already here. That seemed to land somewhere deep. She leaned back slightly, as if letting herself rest for the first time all day. Her shoulders lowered, just a fraction, enough to notice. We talked then, not about solutions, not yet. Just about what had happened, about how quickly things can grow complicated when you're trying to be helpful, about how fear doesn't always look like panic, sometimes it looks like politeness. She told me how tired she'd been lately, how everything felt heavier than it used to, how she'd been afraid that asking for help would make her smaller. I didn't want to be a burden, she said. I looked at her across the table, at the woman who had raised children, kept homes together, remembered birthdays, cooked meals when no one noticed. You were never a burden, I said. The clock ticked. Steady, unforgiving. The truth sat with us now. Not sharp, not cruel, just present. And in that quiet kitchen, with daylight fading and papers finally still, we both understood something had shifted. There was no pretending left, only the work of moving forward. Together. The house was quiet when we finally finished. The dishes had been washed, the papers stacked, tea cold in the mugs we hadn't touched. Even the clock seemed to pause, letting the afternoon settle into itself. I watched her sit in her favorite chair by the window. The light had softened to gold, brushing her hair like it was trying to hold onto something before night fell. She folded her hands over her lap, purse still beside her, and stared out at the street. Nothing moved there. Everything was ordinary, yet nothing felt the same. We'll get it sorted, I said. She nodded, slow and deliberate. Not because she was convinced, but because she wanted to believe it. Her eyes didn't leave the window. She watched neighbors pass, mailboxes open and close, birds settling on the wires. The ordinary world went on, unaware of how fragile the afternoon had been. I thought about the diner, the cards, the errors that had seemed so small but had been anything but. I could still hear the soft beeps of the machine, the polite apologies, the quiet laughs that weren't quite laughter. Do you remember the lunch? I asked. She looked at me then, not with surprise, not with judgment, just a soft acknowledgement, a shared understanding that words could only hint at. I do, she said. We didn't speak again for a while, just sat in the quiet, letting the soft hum of the refrigerator fill the spaces that had once been tense with error and confusion. The lesson wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, slow, unforgiving in its simplicity. I realized that ordinary days could contain their own small storms, not the kind that shatter windows or raise sirens, the kind that whisper through pockets and purses, through hands folded too tightly, through laughter that's a little too thin. She shifted in the chair, stretching her shoulders, then smiled slightly. Not a big smile, not the kind that asks for notice, just enough to feel human again. You know, she said softly, sometimes trouble doesn't knock. Sometimes it just waits for the quiet. I nodded, thinking about the diner, about the machine, about the papers stacked neatly on her table, about how easily we could have missed it all had we not been paying attention. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees. Shadows stretched long across the lawn. The air smelled faintly of earth and evening. I felt the weight of the day lift slowly. Almost imperceptibly, like steam from a kettle that had finally stopped boiling, we moved toward the door, together, but not hurried. Steps slow, deliberate, carrying the understanding that life keeps moving, even when the small things threaten to trip you. The front door closed behind us with a soft click, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then she laughed. A real one this time. Small, gentle, freeing. I smiled too. Some ordinary days and quietly. Some leave a mark you can't see until the light falls just right. That day, we learned both, and I knew, as we stepped into the evening, that ordinary lunches could hold extraordinary truths. We just had to be paying attention.